Welcome to Impact Pasadena. I'm delighted to have today as my guest LA County Supervisor Kathryn Barger. Welcome back, Kathryn.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about some important issues.
Yeah, well, it's terrific to have you. You were here as a guest a few months ago, and we had a terrific response to your appearance. So the work that you and the county supervisors are doing is so important, and it's really great for us to keep up to date on a regular basis, really, on what you've been doing. One of the things that's been, we're distracted by the national news, but really what impacts our lives is what's going on around us in the county, in the city of Pasadena, and the region. And one of the things that we've noticed is, and has been actually in the news a lot, is the homeless population that we have, which has been increasing to a certain degree over the last few years. There are lots of reasons for it, and the solutions I know are very complex. But I know that you particularly have been involved in this and the work on this and trying to find solutions to it. So before we really get into some of the specific policy issues we're thinking that you've been working on, I'd also like to get an overview of this complex problem from you. I mean, what do you see as sort of some of the roots of this? I know it's not simple, but if you could kind of go over what you see as the root of the problem and maybe some of the solutions generally that we can be pursuing as a society.
Yeah, well, I've always said in order to really understand the homeless population, you need to get to the root of the problem.
Yeah.
And there are many people that have different interpretations of what caused this. The number is growing for every individual we get housed. There's another one that presents themselves on the streets. I believe that Prop 47, which decriminalized drug use, as well as the way we've implemented AB 109, which released individuals from prison into local jurisdictions, has created the perfect storm for individuals that are on the street. Add to that the cost of housing, which clearly is a problem, but it's also a problem that's based on supply and demand. We have not kept up with the number of homes that are necessary to be sustainable in this region, and that's actually not just in LA County, that's across the state. And the governor now is taking very, very bold and very definitive steps to address that by mandating that in the Southern California region in the next 8 years we add nearly 1.3 million dwellings into the overall housing market. So we've got a lot of challenges ahead of us. For me, I look at it, depending upon who you talk to, a third of the people that are on the street are facing some sort of mental illness. I believe that it's maybe a little higher because there are many that are using drugs that are dual diagnosed, that once they get clean, their mental illness presents itself. I'm looking at how we can, up in Sacramento, address the issue of Lanham and Petra Short, which are the laws that dictate how we treat someone who is mentally ill. Yeah. And I'm also working on building capacity within our hospitals in order to provide them with the necessary treatment that they need, understanding that with medicine the way it is, it's not institutionalizing, it's stabilizing, and then providing them with housing and housing that will provide them the ability to lead a sustainable life.
Okay. Let me just give you a specific example and sort of walk it through it. At the end of my street, I was going to my work office one day and I saw a guy lying on the street and he was bloodied. And I said, I called the fire department, they came, and I said, what can we do for this guy? And they said, well, we know him. We took him at 2 a.m. this morning into the local hospital, and they released him with a prescription, which he can't afford. He's somewhat belligerent. So just take that individual and let's say what would be a better way for us to handle his situation. Obviously he has medical issues, he has mental health issues, he has housing issues. Not to mention the fact that we're spending a lot of money sending the fire department out with a truck and ladder 3 times a day to try to help this guy. So I know that's a tough question because it's, but very specifically, what could we do about that guy?
Well, no, it's a good question, and I have to say that really does highlight the problem with our system right now. This morning I was with the Mayor Garcetti and all the 88 city mayors. Mayor Garcetti brings together all the mayors from all the cities to discuss issues, and obviously homelessness is first and foremost on everyone's mind. In LA County, what we're doing is, we are good about treating when they're in the hospital, but we need to focus, and we are focusing on the discharge. The discharge means not discharging them back onto the street. Because if you look at the numbers at the coroner, homeless population, homeless are dying on our streets at a rate of 3 per day. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
We need to do a better job. So we are looking at really healthy homes for these individuals so that when they are released from the hospital, they're not released back onto the street. They're put into an environment where they can get the supportive services they need, and then we look for long-term housing. And we are doing that in LA County, and we need to work with all of our hospitals because we're all good about focusing on what we need to focus on, but we work in silos. We need to really blend, and that's why I bring up all the city mayors, because we are getting out there, getting the word out, the best practices as to what we're doing. And you know, if you talk to Huntington Hospital, I'm told anecdotally that they've got clothes and food there because homeless present themselves in the emergency room, and you cannot just kick them back out on the street. So they'll give them a meal and clean clothes, but we now need to not only do that, but get them resources so that we can get them off the street.
Yeah, I know, particularly in Pasadena, some of the mayors feel overwhelmed because they're kind of feeling like they can't handle this huge problem on their own and they need the support. When you talked about alternative housing or intermediate housing, are you thinking of something like Union Station as a place where they would discharge to, you know, the homeless shelter, or are you thinking of something more comprehensive?
We're thinking of something more comprehensive. For example, right now, LA County USC, the old General Hospital, if you're into soap operas, it's seen on the beginning of General Hospital, is no longer in use, and we are converting part of that into rooms that can be used for step down, if you will, beds for individuals that are ready to be discharged from the hospital, but clearly have no place to go. We're expanding that. We've got them throughout our campuses in the county, and you know, I have to say this about Pasadena. One of the only cities that actually had their homeless numbers go down.
Right.
This city has been very proactive, and I really do credit the people that live in the city as well, because it was about educating the individuals that, you know, the homeless are here and they are already here.
Right.
The question is, do we leave them to their own device, or do we give them the services and support they need?
Right.
Union Station is a great example of a partner. That is emergency shelter. In the morning, a lot of the homeless don't want to go into emergency shelter because they've got a lot of belongings. They go in and then they're out in the morning.
Yep.
But Union Station serves an incredible role in letting us address the homeless population.
So you bring up a great issue, because I know that I've read that you have said that it's not just a funding issue. It's, I would say, venture to call it a cultural issue, in the sense that we as a society and cities and the county have to accept the fact that we have this problem, that we need to take a different approach to it. Am I correct about that?
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that you called 911 when you saw that gentleman on the street, downtown, if you've got someone laying on the sidewalk, not moving, people walk by now. We've become so desensitized to the homeless population. And it breaks my heart, because 20 years ago, 911 would have been called. And you know, to your point about the first responders, they know them all by name. And as a matter of fact, down on Skid Row, they know when the first of the month is, because people get their checks for the welfare, and it's not even a check now, it's a card. They get their card loaded with money, and you have overdoses, you have dealers down there, predators taking advantage of these individuals. It is sickening. This is a third world country, and as a society, we have to do better. And you know, I do not believe that housing alone is an issue, but housing has to be at the top of our list, because these people are languishing on the streets, and it's an embarrassment. It is an embarrassment, and I get frustrated because, you know, I don't need Washington D.C. to come out here and tell us how to do our job. We're doing it, and while I'm not trying to boil the ocean as it relates to getting it done, each week we are taking steps toward addressing the homeless population, and each thing we do, and I say we as a board do, together will make a difference, and we are making a difference. The number of homeless that are being housed is something to be proud of. I mean, we've housed over 20,000. The problem is unless we address issues like Prop 47, which, you know, I know of no addict that does not eventually end up on the street. We need to give the courts the ability to mandate that these individuals get treatment. Now, I know the first time you have to want it in order for it to stick. But I guarantee you eventually it does. And right now there is no hammer. So these individuals are getting misdemeanors and are continuing to use and really affecting the quality of life in our communities.
Yeah, I mean, this was exactly what it wasn't a hypothetical in the case that I had. This guy didn't want to go or do or anything. He was very reluctant or recalcitrant. So there needed to be something for these firemen, basically, or the police or whoever, to say, no, we need to take you and do this. Now, explain to me again Prop 47, or explain to our audience Prop 47 and where we are at with that.
So Prop 47 was something that the voters voted on, and I think, I talked to friends who did not realize what was exactly in this proposition.
When did that happen?
Because the title, it seems like it's a long time ago, but it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Okay.
And it was titled basically, safe communities. Now, who does not want a safe community?
Yeah.
I do. But if you look at the language, which really people don't do, when I was in high school, our government's teacher made us read the propositions and give like a book report on them because people do not know what they're voting on.
Yeah.
This actually decriminalized and made drug use a misdemeanor. And so it's no longer a felony, which is not a bad thing. I mean, I understand that the reason why this was done is because the prisons are overcrowded with individuals that have drug offenses. In addition to that, it made any crime where you're stealing $950 or less a misdemeanor, and which is why you see, I was up at a store up in Pasadena, and an individual shoplifted, and they didn't even go after him because the police are saying if it doesn't reach a certain threshold, don't bother us, and many of those are stealing in order to support their habits.
Right.
We need to go in and fix Prop 47, and prior to Prop 47, judges could, they'd go to drug court and judges could say, you're either going to go to jail or you're going to go to a treatment program. Obviously, a lot of them chose a treatment program.
Right.
Because they don't want to go to jail. Right. And no longer can we do that. It's literally what I call a fix-it ticket.
Yeah.
And we have some individuals that are getting 172 tickets. Law enforcement's frustrated because, the broken window syndrome. I mean, individuals who are on the street using, and by the way, dealing is still a felony. So if you're dealing drugs, that is a felony.
Right.
But it's a quality of life issue. It is a quality of life issue for everybody.
Right.
I drove into downtown, and at 8:30 in the morning, in front of the federal building, a guy's shooting up. And I am not making this up.
Yep.
And no one even thinks twice about it.
Yeah. I mean, and this is where your funding comes in, is that on the go to jail or get treatment, there has to be effective treatment going on too. There has to be the resources for treatment for this terrible social problem.
I absolutely agree, and I would rather invest in treatment than invest in prison and jails.
Yep.
There's no question about it. But right now, there is nothing. I mean, there is nothing.
Yeah.
And I see families torn apart.
Yeah.
And people say, I take time. I drive through Skid Row just to remind myself of exactly what is going on. But I also take time to talk to homeless people, which, quite frankly, I know drives some of my staff crazy. But I think it's important for us to understand who they are. Their story is a lot different than their families. Yeah. I guarantee when I had a press conference last week, and there was a homeless woman who's clearly mentally ill, ill. She was going on and about clothes and she was making no sense. Yeah. If I ask her, she says she's fine, but I bet you if I could track down her family, they would beg us to get her off the street. Beg us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can sense your enthusiasm and your commitment to this, and it's so important. And I know that we appreciate your work on it. Sort of to segue into that. Oh, by the way, I have a note that data is really important here that you've said in terms of tracking the homeless population, figuring out. I'm a big data guy. I think it's really important to know, as you said, what are the causes? What are the real situations? What's the reality on the street?
And who are they?
And who are they?
And we weren't doing that. I mean, if you look at two populations are significant on the street as well: the elderly, and foster youth. Yeah. And we were not keeping that data. Foster youth are under our charge. So if there's a growing number, which I've heard anecdotally and now we're tracking, we should look at why they're falling through the cracks. Yeah. When they emancipate out, we should be there to help them. in Hillsides in our own backyard here does a fantastic job of providing supportive services and apartments for those that are emancipating out of the system, which means that they're no longer able to receive any support financially from the county and the government as it relates to living.
Yeah.
So they are basically on their own.
I know at PCC, where I'm on the Board of Trustees, we understand this to be a serious problem for our students for completion and all the other issues for the foster kids. But segueing into an issue that you bring up related to homelessness, which is mental health, and then I know you've been very active in Child Protective Services, the issues around that. Could you kind of give me an idea of what's been going on there?
So which do you want to go on first? Mental health?
Let's do mental health.
We'll do mental health first. My passion. I believe that when you look at the Lanterman-Petra Short Act, which was written 30 years ago at least, it's never been revisited. And times have changed. The way we provide mental health services has changed. The mental health treatment has changed, but the law has not. So we're doing we are doing a deep dive. I say we, I'm working with Darrell Steinberg, who's a mayor of Sacramento, but is someone who I admire because when he was in the Senate up in Sacramento, truly is a pioneer when it comes to mental health legislation. For example, we're putting in mental health urgent care centers. You know, you've got an urgent care center if you need to get in after hours, if you, hurt yourself or you're not feeling well, but nothing for mental health. So we are building urgent care centers throughout the county. That's thanks to Darrell Steinberg. So we're going to do a deep dive 2-year audit on mental health law, LPS, and see where we need to update it. And then what we're going to do at the same time, and I'm hoping and I'm confident that this governor is going to recognize that this is important, is we're going to ask the governor to allow us to negotiate with the federal government an 1115 waiver. And what this is will allow us to bill Medicaid for mental health beds. When Lyndon Johnson did away with mental health hospitals, they also took away the funding because they wanted to ensure that it did not resurrect itself. Because of the opioid crisis, this administration has recognized that we need to in fact increase the capacity as it relates to mental health beds. But in order to do that, you've got to enter into a waiver with the federal government. So I'm encouraging the governor to do that and allow us to negotiate with the federal government so that we can build capacity. And again, it's not going to be like one flew over the cuckoo's nest, because that is not the goal. The goal is not to institutionalize.
Right.
The goal is to provide the ability to stabilize, well, actually first diagnose and then stabilize, and then house.
You know, it's interesting because this is something that hadn't occurred to me, but I can see how important it is that the legal framework for doing some of these things. And I think that would be, I imagine it's an uphill battle to try to change the law in some of these areas, like you're talking about Prop 47 and some of the, involuntary commitment issues and things like that.
So Prop 47, I don't believe that will be difficult. I mean, obviously, it's gonna take work to educate people to read before they vote. But when people find out, at least when I talk to individuals in the community, when they find out exactly what they voted for, they say, I never would have voted for that. There are ways to clean up the language, and there is a proposition that's going to be moving forward, and there's individuals that are right now on the ground getting that ready to put on the ballot. And with that is going to come, the ability not to criminalize drug use, but to force people to accept the fact that they have an issue and get the help and treatment they need. On LPS, you're right. You're right, LPS is going to be an uphill battle, but what I will say is 10 years ago, people wouldn't touch this. Last year, I focused on those individuals on the street that needed medical care, but because of their mental illness refused it, got legislation written, got it sponsored. I got my board to support moving it forward. I had one colleague who said it will not make it out of the assembly. Not only did it make it out of the assembly, it made it out of the assembly 75-0.
Yeah.
Now what happened in the Senate is a whole nother story, but the point being, people recognize that the status quo is not working. Even Senator Weiner, who's from San Francisco, sponsored legislation having to do with conservatorships. And San Francisco also is ground zero for what's going on with the homeless. That speaks volumes.
Yeah. Well, I sometimes think the uphill battles are the ones that are most worth fighting. And I would say if I were your colleague on the board, I would probably be listening pretty carefully to you because you're very convincing on this one.
Well, I say leaders lead, and I want to lead, and I believe that by the grace of God, it hasn't happened in my family, but I know people in the community who it has, and the sense of helplessness is overwhelming. And for anyone that says that the focus is on criminalizing, it's not. The system is, as it is written right now, is criminalizing these individuals. That's why we have a jail that is one of the largest mental health institutions, definitely in the state, if not the nation.
And it's across socioeconomic borders, class borders, race, everything. I mean, this
mental health does not care how much money you have in the bank.
You got it.
Some would argue that, well, I won't go there.
No. Child Protective Services, tragic case of Noah Quattro, and that's just an example of some of the things that we have to be attentive to.
Yeah, and you know, I separate each one. Any child that dies in our care is heartbreaking, and each one of the cases that have come out of the Antelope Valley have different circumstances. And in Noah's case, Judge Michael Nash, who is our inspector that oversees a unit that does child death reviews and really looks at the system when something like this happens, but also looks at the system as a whole when, you know, just to make sure that we're doing it the right way. His report came back and said that, in fact, one of the key issues on Noah was when the judge signed the order authorizing taking Noah out of the home, why did not they act? And Judge Nash felt that given everything he knew and read, the department acted appropriately. But the fact remains that Noah's gone. I think what frustrated me is the bureaucracy, and I said this at the board meeting. The bureaucracy is killing not only children, it is going to kill me, because, you know, I look at the fact that we after Gabriel, social workers retention was identified. So I said, let's look at giving bonuses up there, and let's look at why we're not doing retention. With Noah, they still hadn't done the bonuses, so I brought them before the board and I said, believe it or not, the buck is going to stop with me. I'm the elected and I accept that. And I think that's part of why people are so disgusted with politics today is it's everyone else's problem. But I'm not shying away from the fact that I'm the supervisor, the buck stops with me. But I pointed to Human Resources, the Director of Children and Family Services, and the CEO, and I said, and the buck stops with you too. So if I have to bring you each week and shame you for not getting things done, I will. So now we have a bonus in place. We're talking with UC Bakersfield about actually doing a social worker training up in the Antelope Valley so that we get people from the valley. And then we're talking about keeping them up there and the caseload. It should not take a child. This should be done just as good practice. And so I've been very aggressive on this, and then we also carved it out and made it basically its own division. So there's a director that's now going to be held directly responsible for that. Under the other structure, it was an individual that had several different offices. No, I want it dedicated to the Antelope Valley. This is all about the Antelope Valley, and it's about giving the social workers the support they need as well. And I am committed to this. And it's something that is going to be an ongoing discussion. I'm not taking my eye off the ball. I handled children's services when I first started with the county. This is my passion as well. And these children are victims just by the pure fact that they came into the system. So we're going to focus on trauma-informed care, because taking a child out of a home, even if it's an abusive home, is traumatic. And so, you know, obviously Noah's affected me tremendously, and I was at a town hall with Anthony Portantino where Gabriel Fernandez's aunt attended, and I sat and talked with her afterwards. You can't defend what's not defensible, right? And I take to heart what they say, and I think about it quite often. You know,
I've dealt with institutions, and you're dealing with a very large and influential, well-funded, powerful institution, and we all see the frustrations of bureaucracy. And I'm seeing that people are looking, not just after the fact when some tragedy happens, but looking at results, as you're saying, is tell me what is actually going on. Don't tell me the the procedures that you've always followed or how you've always done this, or to just sort of bottom line what the heck is going on here. And now I know that that's a long process to try to streamline that, but I take it from what you're saying that you are making progress. Are you optimistic about it, or is it just the can't fight City Hall?
Oh, no, I'm very optimistic.
Yeah, I imagine.
I have to say that I've been with the county for 30 years, and I think one of the frustrations that I also have is we can study things into oblivion.
Right.
And I know I don't need to study this. I know what needs to be done.
Right.
And I've got the support of my colleagues. Supervisor Hilda Solis has been phenomenal on this.
Okay.
Even on the hubs, which are medical medical facilities where we can do forensic treatment for children.
Yeah.
And we've done, Department of Health Services has dragged, quite frankly, their feet on this.
Yeah.
So we are being very aggressive in ensuring that we've got all the resources, and that includes the law enforcement side, because there was for lack of a better term, maybe a disconnect between law enforcement and our social workers in terms of making sure that everyone is involved and everyone's up to date.
Yeah.
So we're looking and we're addressing that. I have faith. I mean, can I guarantee that another child's not going to be hurt?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
But then again, that's not the government's fault. Society as itself has to look at these cases coming in and wonder what in the heck is going on. Because I've read reports of cases that don't even make it into the LA Times or into the Pasadena Star News, and what's being done to children is beyond anything I can even imagine. And then I would also highlight the fact that we have successes as well.
Yeah.
When I was at Hillsides, there were two young teenagers, actually not teenagers now, well, they're younger than me, but in their 20s that came back that are success stories.
Yeah.
So we have success stories as well.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to give up hope with anything we do with DCFS.
Yeah, and I know that the problem often is that you get a lot of happy talk or nice program descriptions and things like that, but you're not seeing results, and that's where someone like you who are really digging down, and I sense that you're pretty aggressive about that, which is a great thing.
Well, I mean, you haven't read about it in the paper in the last week, but that doesn't mean I'm not working on it. I'm not one of these that looks for my name in the headlines and then go on to the next thing. I follow through and see it through. And I have an unbelievable team in my office that works with me, and so I have every confidence that we are going to make the system better, and there's always room for improvement, I think, in anything you do, and we will always continue to look for that room for improvement, but right now we need to fix what's broken and then improve upon that.
Well, Supervisor Barger, I really appreciate your being here. We have a lot of other topics to talk about, so if you'd be willing to stay for another segment, we'd really appreciate it. I want to talk about voting. I want to talk about issues with the Sheriff's Department, economic development of jobs. So there's a lot on your plate. So thank you again.
Thank you.
I really
It's a real
appreciate
pleasure.
your being here.
Real pleasure.
It's great for our audience.
Yeah.